Well, it was a good day for the Vancouver Canucks in filling out the all-star rosters. Marc-Andre Fleury gets himself into second place all-time in the NHL and wins, and Valeri Nichushkin goes into the player assistance program. A lot to discuss on today's episode of the Locked On NHL podcast. We are your team every day.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's happening, everybody? Welcome into another edition of the Locked On NHL podcast. We are your team every day. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On NHL your first listen each and every day. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platforms so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. Today's episode of Locked On NHL is brought to you by Game Time. You can download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your purchase. On today's episode of Locked On NHL, we'll take a look at the remainder of the Western Conference All-Star roster. As the fill-ins were announced, the voted-in players were added to the mix. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about Marc-Andre Fleury's historic night for the Minnesota Wild last night, and we'll discuss both Valeri Nichushkin heading into the player assistance program and Gabriel Landeskog potentially getting himself closer to a return for the Avalanche. My name is Seth Toupal, host of Locked On Wild, one half of the dynamic duo for your Western Conference Tuesday edition of Locked On NHL. Joined today again by Nick Morgan of Locked On Predators. Nick, a busy one for us here today because I don't know what that was.
Apparently, if you give a thumbs up to your laptop, fireworks pop up.
Wow. So it works for some, not for others. That's okay,
cool.
though.
Yeah,
that completely threw me, but that's sweet.
And we'll be seeing some fireworks at the All-Star games, Seth, because hey, the rosters are out.
Great segue. We saw the filling of the rosters, and let's just start with the coaching side, as Rick Tocchet and Rick Bowness will be coaching in the All-Star game. And I mean, you look at it, and those are the two best teams in the Western Conference, and so obviously their coaches deserve some accolades as well. And it's crazy that I think those two franchises are the ones that at this point in the season have been the two best consistently in the West.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that I think that's like the NHL rule, where it's like the first and second at the certain time frame are the All-Star coaches. I remember it used to be the Stanley Cup winning coach and the Stanley Cup running up coach used to be like the head coach, and I don't know who knows how they do it anymore. Yeah, I mean, good to kind of see two teams that we weren't really sure were going to be in this position represented on the bench. And if you're the Vancouver Canucks, you're also going to be well represented on the ice because 4 fan votes. More than any other team. Remember, there's only 12 spots in the entire NHL up for grabs, and Vancouver put 4 of their guys in those 12 spots.
Yeah, it ended up that it was Brock Besser, Thatcher Demko, JT Miller, and Elias Pettersson. Then also Alexander Georgiev, Cale Makar, and Leon Draisaitl were all voted in from the Western Conference side. And I mean, really, I have no objection to any of those guys being added into the mix. I mean, Georgiev near the top of the list from a wins perspective because he starts almost every game for the Colorado Avalanche. And so no surprises there. No surprise on Makar. Draisaitl just having another Draisaitl-y season. And Vancouver getting rewarded for what has been just a real solid showing for them. So from the from the vote inside, I really don't have a ton of objection to any of these guys. I did find it interesting though that Vancouver's the one that gets the most love here.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the Canucks just really like their guys. I mean, Colorado added 2 more, so I guess Avs fans too. And on the other side, Toronto putting 3 in was no surprise. But I mean, it's hard to argue with like any of the Vancouver picks, because I mean, hey, they're the best team, and it's like how there's always like the fan vote where there's like the one guy that gets in just based on name alone, or that he just happens to be like the veteran player on like your team's the biggest ballot stuffing team in that year. But you look and over the 4 Canucks, and pretty much all 4 guys voted in, plus Quinn Hughes, of course, deserve to be there. Besser is having a season that I think a lot of people would maybe call out of nowhere, one of the NHL's leading goal scorers. Demko, you talk about the sort of redemption year that he's having, back healthy for the first time in a couple of years, and really starting to show like the old Thatcher Demko. JT Miller is quite like one of maybe the most underrated guy in the NHL this season. I think he was maybe 5th in scoring last time I checked. It was like top 5, 6, somewhere in that area. And then Elias Pettersson, who is pacing that offense. So I'm more impressed with the fact that Vancouver won all these players, and it's not like it was just Vancouver fans stuffing the ballot box. Like they clearly all of them had a very, very, very good case to be an all-star, even over some of the guys that didn't make it.
We're burying the lead from the all-star perspective, though, here, Nick. Did you see that the NHL is really trying to live long and prosper in how the jerseys were revealed?
Oh, man.
I tweeted out a picture, or I quote tweeted a picture of the jerseys, and I was like, and somebody responded with a picture of the Star Trek outfits, and I'm like, that's it. And there's nothing wrong with them per se, but they're just very, I don't know.
It's like I said, it was a big moment for Microsoft Paint. Because I mean, that's what it just looked like. Somebody like took the Hardee's logo, and just like stuck it on the jersey, and just did a little yellow paint marker and erased the little smiley face, and just wrote like All-Star on it. Also, for the whatever crossover of NHL and NASCAR fans there are listening to this, go look at that red jersey and tell me that doesn't remind you of like the number 94 Bill Elliott paint scheme, the McDonald's paint scheme from the 1990s. And again, like the 2 crossover NASCAR NHL fans listening to this right now are going to remember and be like, yeah, absolutely, that does.
That's just outstanding. I'm not a NASCAR guy myself, but I can just imagine. I can just imagine, and it just, it's. I don't know what we expected from the All-Star uniforms, but I guess I didn't expect that.
It was the Biebs. Chalk it up to the Biebs. That was his baby.
Well, stay in your lane, I guess, and just stick to music. That's about all I got.
What did you think of the all black Maple Leafs alternate jersey? Because that was his too.
It's better than the Stars neon green all black, I guess.
Yeah, the jersey with the Maple Leafs jersey was a hit. This one is a little bit of a stretch.
Yeah, let's just I don't know. It's hurting my brain. Let's move on to a milestone performance for Marc-Andre Fleury as he moves into second place all time in wins in the NHL. We'll talk about the chances that he passes Martin Brodeur as we continue today's episode of the Locked On NHL podcast after this. Today's episode of Locked On NHL is brought to you by Game Time. And if one of your resolutions in 2024 is to attend more concerts, see your favorite sports team in action more frequently, or to just go find some comedy and put some laughter in your life, Game Time can help you do that and can make it as stress-free as possible. Game Time offers you last-minute deals on tickets. Plus, they also show you what you'll see from your seat before you even buy your tickets. And don't worry about those pesky fees that pop up in the checkout line. Game Time will show you exactly what it's going to cost for your tickets before you ever purchase your tickets. All of those are reasons to make Game Time your go-to destination for ticket buying because they can help you take the guesswork out of buying tickets. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Welcome back to today's episode of the Locked On NHL podcast. Once again, we are your team every day. Seth Toupal joined by Nick Morgan, and Nick, Marc-Andre Fleury got his win last night to move him into second place all time, 552 wins on the season. He's totally going to stay in the league long enough to pass Martin Brodeur, right?
How much does he have left?
He's got to, I think he has to get to 140 wins. 140 more to pass Brodeur.
So that's basically 3 more seasons of being the best goalie in the NHL.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see 3 more 40-win seasons out of Marc-Andre Fleury. Why not?
So
Let's just have him go for it. Be like the Ovechkin, where it's just he's going to be in net until he's like 51 chasing this record.
Just let him go to the Boston Bruins and just have him start and win all 82 games for 3 straight seasons. The funny thing about this, in all honesty, is it's been reported throughout the year that it looks like this is going to be it for Fleury, that this is going to be the final season of his career. But Nick, he's playing pretty well at this stage of his career. And so it's going to be his call. Mm-hmm. But honestly, if he decided that he wanted to give it one more go, he's still productive enough as a goalie to be able to pick up wins in this league. And I don't know if it would be a reunion in Pittsburgh. I don't know if it probably wouldn't be a reunion in, Vegas or Chicago. It feels like it would be either Pittsburgh or Minnesota if he does want to give it one more go. But then the question that I posed after last night's game, if he does come back, he's probably not going to catch Brodeur. He's not going to catch Brodeur. So at this point, you're only coming back to try to get one more Stanley Cup. And that's probably not likely in Minnesota. Is that something that Pittsburgh would be able to achieve? I don't know. It's hard to say.
I feel like Pittsburgh this season right here is kind of their window.
Yeah.
And I was a little bit surprised that, they were even in it this year. I thought they were going to take a big step back, even with Erik Karlsson in the fold. So, I mean, they're sort of the poster childs of proving everybody wrong right now. But, the big question I have with Fleury is obviously shutout last night, has been playing pretty well over the past, couple weeks or so, but not the best start to the season. I think he's at .897 save percentage, which means his save percentage since that last year in Vegas dips a little bit every year. And remember,
Mhm.
even before that season where he came back and won the Vezina, somehow despite not being starting goalie in the playoffs. Um, you know, it was kind of shaky for Fleury even before that. So I mean, the big question, if you're any team that is kind of looking to make that sort of, oh, let's just have Marc-Andre Fleury backstop his way to the wins record. Whatever team, you're just going to have to ask, okay, which Marc-Andre Fleury are we going to be getting for the next 1, 2, 3 years, however long like you would want to come back for? Are you getting, the Marc-Andre Fleury from a couple of years ago? Probably not. You're getting this Marc-Andre Fleury who is just, still been all right, but has kind of slowly progressed every year over the last, 4 years or so. And obviously not all of it's his fault. Anybody's going to look bad on the Chicago Blackhawks over the past couple of years. Um, yeah, I just think I'm not sure that we're gonna get Fleury's best if he decides to come back. Could be wrong, could be very wrong, but it just kind of feels like maybe this is sort of the last big run for Marc-Andre Fleury before he sort of rides into the sunset. Unless if he comes back, I just don't trust that it's going to be a spectacular run.
Yeah, and I do get the sense that this was the last thing that he was chasing. Like, to be able to get himself to second all time in wins. That was
Right.
kind of the last, because he's won Stanley Cups. He's won Vezina trophies. He's accomplished pretty much everything as a goalie that you can throughout the course of his career. And so I don't think, unless he signs with somebody else, which at this point, are you going to uproot your family to a different location for one season? I think at this point, he probably is going to hang it up once the season is done and just be able to go into the Hall of Fame right away, because he's unquestioned one of the best goalies to ever do it. And I find myself trying to appreciate it more as the season unfolds, that that Wild fans have had the opportunity to watch him do his thing, even at the kind of the twilight of his career. It's been a blast to have him as part of this group, and to just see kind of how he rubs off on other players as somebody who's been in the league for 20 seasons. Like, you want a testament to longevity and durability at the goalie position. There are few, if any, who have been able to do it better than Fleury. And
Yeah.
so, it's fun to see him kind of leave his mark on this team and get a standing ovation from the fans last night. He got absolutely mobbed by his teammates after the game. It was just a really cool moment to see, and I keep telling myself to enjoy every second of it. We don't see this all that often, where a franchise gets somebody who is like a Hall of Famer to come in and to just impact them for a couple of seasons and then right off into the sunset. It's been a lot of fun from my
Yeah.
perspective to see it unfold.
And he genuinely loves Minnesota as
Mhm.
well. Remember, he had a chance to, I think, get traded last year at the deadline, or was it the year before? And didn't want to leave Minnesota. A chance to go somewhere else as a free agent, didn't want to leave Minnesota. So he's comfortable there. And I think he really likes playing there. And I think that speaks a lot to, sort of the environment around Minnesota and the appreciation that the fans have for him, how much he likes that locker room. So, yeah, I mean, if there was a situation where he'd come back, I'd feel like it's wild or nothing at this point.
Yeah, I agree. So we'll see. There's always going to be Flurry watch until he officially decides to hang it up. But congratulations to the one they call the Flower for win number 552 in his illustrious career. We will finish today's episode by talking about Valeri Nichushkin, heading into the player assistance program and the potential for the captain to join the Avalanche on the ice before the postseason gets started. That is all on the way here on today's episode of Locked On NHL. Once again, we are your team every day.
Today's episode is brought to you by Sleeper. It is almost the halfway point of the NHL season, and regardless of where your team is in the current standings, I want to remind you, you could still win big by playing daily fantasy hockey on Sleeper, the official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL Network. Sleeper is our number one choice for daily fantasy sports, and especially daily fantasy hockey, because with Sleeper, you can win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy hockey contests. All you have to do is pick whether names like Elias Pettersson, Sidney Crosby, Nathan McKinnon, or Connor McDavid will record more or less than their Sleeper projections for things like goals, assists, saves, plus minus, and more in a given game. To win a 100 times bet on Sleeper, you need to correctly predict the outcome of 8 player stats. You heard me. You can win 100 times your money playing daily fantasy hockey with Sleeper. So start paying attention and nail your picks so you can start winning big. Use promo code LOCKEDONNHL and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availability.
One final segment of today's episode of the Locked On NHL podcast. And after today's episode, make sure that you head over to the first of its kind 24/7 streaming channel. Locked On Sports Today will take you through all of the biggest stories in the wide world of sports. 24/7 sports for you. So make sure that you subscribe if you haven't already to Locked On Sports Today, so you don't miss out on your favorite teams and your favorite sports all throughout the day. Seth Toupal and Nick Morgan finishing up today's episode of Locked On NHL. And Nick, we got some news yesterday from the Colorado Avalanche that Valeri Nichushkin is going to be heading to the player assistance program. And so first off, good for Nichushkin to it's always a tough step to acknowledge in any walk of life. It's always a tough step to acknowledge that you need some help, and credit to him for putting himself in position to get it. That I think is the big takeaway from this. That's the big message to pull from this. And obviously, you know, we saw the support messages from the Avalanche yesterday. And so the hope first and foremost is that he's able to get what he needs before the thought even enters your head that you hope that he's able to get back on the ice. Like, first and foremost, let's look at the human element here and just hope that he's able to get what he needs. And then you can look at a return to the ice, you know, at some point down the line after that.
Agree. I think you 100% said it best. And I think it's tough in, you know, the modern sports environment because, you know, there's not just you want to see your team do well, but, you know, there's fantasy sports and there's, you know, betting apps and everything like that. And I think just people get sort of caught up on, okay, I need this player to do well because, you know, I have, you know, money on this game, or, you know, I need a big day from this guy because he's on my fantasy team, or, you know, oh, my team is screwed because this player's gone now. And I think it's really easy to fall into that habit. And I think, you know, there are certain situations that pop up around the NHL every year that I think forces us to remind ourselves that these are human beings at a job, you know, in all intents and purposes. And your job is not necessarily your life. I mean, if you or I, Seth, or anybody listening needed, you know, some sort of help or needed to step away for whatever reason, you know, we would expect sort of our employers, our families, our friends to kind of, you know, or the people we work with to kind of, hopefully be understanding and give us that space. So, when a situation like Valeri Nichushkin pops up, I think that's important for us to remember, is that this is a human being trying to help his life. And that's something, as soon as he makes that decision, his job, which is hockey, comes second. So I think you said it best. As for the on ice impact, yeah, I mean, this is a interesting situation for Colorado because he was playing extremely well over the last little bit. I think he had 6 points, including 5 goals in his last 6 games. 42 points this season in 40 games. He's back to kind of where we saw him a couple of years ago. And this is an Avalanche team that has kind of struggled with depth at times this year, beyond the guys like Nathan McKinnon and Cale Makar and Nichushkin. So this is going to test the Avalanche, a little bit further to see how they're going to step up and get some of that lost production, maybe in the form of another big name player who might just happen to sort of pop up on the team in the next little bit.
Yeah, funny you should mention that, because there were also reports swirling that Landeskog, the captain, is trying to get himself back into playing shape to potentially be able to join the roster ahead of the postseason. And Nick, you and I have talked about this in previous episodes. It's been a Colorado team that has certainly racked up wins, but they just, since Landeskog went out of the lineup, they just have not had kind of that put away gear to where they're beating teams. A 5-2 win is certainly a strong showing, but with Landeskog in the lineup, some of those games were ending up 7-2, 8-2. Like, he just adds, as you said, with Nichushkin out of the lineup, he just adds an element to what the Avs have been able to do. And so if they were able to get him back, I know if we look at the Western Conference right now, you'd put Winnipeg as probably the team to beat in the Western Conference right now. Vancouver is in that conversation too. But if you add Landeskog to that Avalanche mix going into the postseason, honestly, for me, I think that vaults the Avs to at least number 2 in the West. If they were able to get him back going into the playoffs, he makes that big of a difference to what the Avalanche do. And so if they get him back, that is massive for Colorado, because they're going to make the postseason. Like, there's no level of epic collapse that could keep them out of the playoffs at this point. If they can add that, if they can add Landeskog to the mix, that's a dangerous team.
Yeah. All right. So please join us again in 4 months when we talk about the Avalanche's epic collapse and just barely missing the playoffs. The Nashville Predators squeak in again to the last spot. No, I mean, look, we talked about earlier, with some of the stuff that came up with who was it? Was it Devon Taze's comments, sort of after the locker room, and the whole, Mikko Rantanen and versus, Arturi Lekkonen's dad thing that was going on. And, we kind of mentioned it was just sort of weird vibes in the locker room. And, people forget that, Gabe Landeskog is the captain of the Colorado Avalanche for a reason, because he's sort of that glue guy. He's sort of, the main man in the locker room, the guy that, players come to, the guy that, can kind of sort out, talk through some stuff with guys. So I think just having that back, that sort of aspect back, gets the Avalanche back to maybe like the 2022 vibes. Or, the vibes when the Avalanche were first really starting to come up, and Landeskog was not only a very strong player, but, he's sort of the guy to kind of manage the locker room a bit. And, I'm with you. Whatever the Avalanche do at the trade deadline, it's not going to be as impactful as potentially getting Landeskog back from the playoffs. And it seems like that's kind of the timetable is let's get him skating, let's get him up to speed. And if we're in the postseason, he's ready to go for game one. That seems to kind of be what the strategy is for the Avs at this point. But yeah, I mean, if that happens, that's the biggest addition to a team's roster going into the postseason.
Yeah, that would add just another layer to the Western Conference playoff picture, is having him back. And I mean, the postseason is compelling enough as it is. Could be some juicy matchups in the West when we get to the postseason picture. So
Yeah.
we'll keep an eye on it for you. We'll, of course, have plenty more on that as we get closer to the playoffs. I don't want to think about the playoffs right now because there's still another half of the season to go. And so Locked On NHL will have you covered as we move throughout the rest of the season. That is going to conclude today's episode. So, again, we appreciate everybody tuning in on a daily basis and making Locked On NHL part of your daily routine and your first listen each and every day. You can find more coverage from Locked On NHL throughout the week with new episodes every Monday through Friday from our panel of hosts and the other Locked On NHL experts. So please do tune in throughout the week. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube if you have not already. And we will catch you again tomorrow with yet another edition of the Locked On NHL podcast. Once again, we are your team every day.